Here's a man born into royalty, wealth, power, pleasure, everything a human being could want, handed to him before he could even ask. Siddhartha Gautama, a prince shielded from every discomfort, every ugly truth about life. His father built him a world made of walls designed to keep suffering out. And it worked, for a while. But here's the thing about walls. They don't eliminate what's on the other side. They just delay the encounter. When Siddhartha finally stepped outside, and he did, he saw what his father had spent decades hiding from him: old age, sickness, death, not as abstract concepts, as living, breathing realities. People rotting, people dying, people suffering in ways his palace never prepared him for, and something broke in him. Not broke as in fell apart, broke as in cracked open. This is where his story gets interesting, because most people, when confronted with suffering, do one of two things. They look away, or they numb themselves. He did neither. He walked straight into it, left the palace, left his wife, left his newborn son, left every single comfort he'd ever known, not because he didn't love them, but because he recognized something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, that none of it was going to save him. Not the wealth, not the pleasure, not the power. None of it was a solution to the fundamental problem of being human. And that's a brutal realization, especially when you're someone who has everything. So he wandered for years, starved himself, meditated until his body nearly gave out. Tried every extreme, and none of it worked either. The ascetic life was just the opposite end of the same trap. Indulgence on one side, self-destruction on the other. Both were escapes. Both missed the point. But then, and this is the part that matters, he sat down under a tree, and he stopped running, stopped chasing, stopped performing. He just observed. His own mind, his own patterns, the machinery of his own suffering. And what he found there wasn't some mystical revelation wrapped in cosmic light. It was a diagnosis, clinical, precise, a complete framework for understanding why human beings suffer and what, if anything, can actually be done about it. That's what Buddha's philosophy really is. Not religion, not ritual, a psychological autopsy of the human condition. And it starts with one uncomfortable truth. Buddha doesn't let anyone off the hook with just meditation and good vibes. He makes something very clear. Awakening is not a passive event. It's built through action, deep, repeated, deliberate action. And that's exactly what the 6 Paramitas are. 6 disciplines that reshape a person from the inside out, not in a weekend, not through one flash of insight, but through relentless, sustained practice. The word paramita means perfection, or more literally, gone to the other shore. These aren't gentle suggestions. They're the vehicle that carries someone from confusion to clarity, from selfishness to something far more powerful. Generosity, dana. Buddha puts this one first, and not by accident. He places generosity at the foundation because it strikes directly at the ego's deepest reflex, clinging, holding on, hoarding what's mine. He argues that giving isn't about being nice, it's about breaking attachment's grip. When a person gives, money, time, energy, even just attention, they're practicing the act of letting go. But here's what most people miss. Buddha identifies 3 levels of generosity: giving material things, giving protection, freedom from fear, and giving wisdom. The highest form, it's not handing someone money, it's helping them see clearly. Morality, shila. Buddha doesn't treat ethics like a rule book dropped from the sky. He treats it like mental hygiene. A person doesn't avoid harmful action because some deity is keeping score. They avoid it because harmful action poisons their own mind. He points out that every act rooted in greed, hatred, or delusion creates suffering. For others, yes, but also for yourself. So morality isn't about being good. It's about not destroying yourself from the inside. Patience, kshanti. This is the one people underestimate the most. Buddha argues that patience is not passive. It's one of the fiercest forms of inner strength a human being can develop. Because real patience means enduring discomfort, hostility, injustice, without losing your center, without retaliating, without collapsing into bitterness. He warns that anger is the single fastest way to destroy everything the other paramitas build. One burst of rage can undo years of progress. So patience isn't weakness, it's armor. Diligence, virya. Buddha makes no room for ambiguity here. None of this works without effort. Joyful effort specifically, not grinding yourself into dust, but showing up again and again with energy and genuine enthusiasm. He points out that laziness wears 3 disguises: doing nothing, staying busy with the wrong things, and giving up too soon. All 3 are traps. Diligence is the thing that keeps the entire path from collapsing. Meditation, dhyana. This is where the mind gets trained. And Buddha doesn't frame meditation as relaxation. He treats it as the disciplined work of stabilizing the mind, focusing it, making it usable. He argues that an untrained mind is essentially worthless for real insight. It bounces from thought to thought, craving to craving, never settling. Meditation is the practice of making the mind still enough to see things as they actually are. Wisdom, prajna. This is the crown, the whole point. Buddha says wisdom is what transforms the other 5 from good habits into actual liberation. Without it, generosity is just charity. Patience is just endurance. Meditation is just sitting quietly. Wisdom, in his framework, means seeing reality without distortion, no illusions, no projections, no ego editing the truth, and the deepest wisdom of all, understanding emptiness, that nothing has a fixed, independent self, not you, not the world, not even suffering itself. That's the 6, not abstract ideals, a complete system for inner transformation built by a man who understood the human mind better than most ever will. Most people look at their suffering and see chaos, a mess of emotions, bad luck, wrong turns, no pattern, no logic, just pain that seems to show up uninvited. Buddha didn't see chaos. He saw a chain, a sequence, a precise 12-step mechanism that generates every ounce of human suffering. Not 11, not 13, 12. And each one feeds directly into the next. He called it pratiti samutpada, dependent origination. The 12 Nidānas, and it's less a spiritual teaching and more a diagnostic blueprint, a complete map of how a mind traps itself. Here's how he laid it out. It starts with avidya, ignorance. Not the I didn't know that kind, deep structural ignorance, a fundamental misreading of reality itself. Buddha argues this is the root, the contaminated lens through which everything else gets distorted. You don't even know you're wearing it. From ignorance arise samskaras, volitional formations, mental patterns, reflexes of thought and intention shaped by that ignorance. These aren't conscious choices. They're deeply conditioned reactions, running in the background like old software you never updated. Those formations condition vijnana, consciousness, not awareness in a pure sense, but a consciousness already colored, already biased, already looking at the world through a cracked window. That conditioned consciousness gives rise to nama-rupa, mind and body, the psychophysical organism, the whole package of you, your mental categories, your physical form, all of it shaped by what came before. From mind and body come the Shadayatana, the 6 sense spaces: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, 6 doors through which the world pours in. But these aren't neutral doors. They're already built on a biased foundation. When those sense spaces make contact with the world, you get sparsha, contact, the raw collision between a sense organ, its object, and consciousness. This is where inside meets outside, and it's never clean. Contact produces vedana, feeling, not emotion, something more basic, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. A gut-level registration. Buddha points out this is the critical junction, the fork in the road, because what happens next determines everything. From feeling arises trishna, craving. The mind lunges. Pleasant feeling, it wants more. Unpleasant feeling, it wants it gone. This is where the trap snaps shut. He warns that craving is not desire in the ordinary sense. It's a compulsive, reflexive grasping that most people never even notice happening. Craving hardens into upadana, clinging. Now it's no longer a passing impulse. It's a grip, an attachment to pleasure, to views, to rituals, to the very idea of a self. The mind wraps itself around these things and refuses to let go. Clinging fuels bhava, becoming. A momentum builds. An entire identity takes shape around what you cling to. You're not just wanting anymore. You're becoming someone who wants. The pattern solidifies into existence itself. Becoming leads to jati, birth. Not just physical birth, the birth of new states of being, new identities, new cycles of entanglement. One life of craving giving rise to the next. And birth inevitably leads to jara maranana, aging, decay, and death, along with sorrow, grief, and despair, the whole catastrophe. That's the chain. 12 links, each one producing the next. No link exists on its own. No single cause explains suffering, but together they explain all of it. And here's what makes Buddha's framework so ruthlessly practical. He didn't just map the chain. He argued that if you break any single link, especially craving, especially ignorance, the whole thing collapses. The chain doesn't just describe the trap, it shows you exactly where to cut. Buddha didn't sugarcoat what your mind is doing to you. He called it the monkey mind, and that term alone tells you everything you need to know about how he saw human psychology. Your mind, according to Buddha, is like a monkey. Not a calm, collected monkey sitting in a tree. No, a drunk monkey. A drunk monkey that's just been stung by a scorpion, swinging from branch to branch, shrieking, panicking, grabbing onto one thing, then immediately leaping to the next. No direction, no purpose, just pure chaotic motion. And here's the thing, he wasn't being poetic, he was being clinical. Buddha argues that this is the default state of the human mind. Left unchecked, your thoughts don't serve you, they torment you. They jump from a memory of something embarrassing you did 5 years ago to anxiety about something that hasn't even happened yet, then to a craving, then to a grudge, then back to the anxiety, over and over and over. You're not thinking, you're being thought. That distinction matters because most people go through their entire lives believing they're in control of their own minds. Buddha says they're not. He says the mind, in its natural, untrained state, is essentially running a chaos program. And you, the person who thinks they're in charge, you're just along for the ride. He points out something brutal here. The monkey mind doesn't just create noise, it creates suffering. Every swing from branch to branch is a swing between craving and aversion. You want something you don't have. You fear losing something you do have. You replay a conversation and rewrite it in your head. You rehearse arguments that will never happen. And each of these swings pulls you further and further away from the one place where peace actually exists, the present moment. But Buddha doesn't just diagnose the problem. He's not interested in just telling you your mind is a mess. He actually gives you something to do about it. He argues that awareness is the antidote, not force, not suppression. You don't wrestle the monkey into submission. That only makes it wilder. Instead, you watch it, you observe it. You sit still and you let the monkey do its thing, and you just notice. That's it. That's the entire mechanism. And it sounds too simple, almost insultingly simple. But Buddha warns that simplicity is not the same as easy. Watching your own mind without reacting to it, without getting dragged into the story it's telling you, that is one of the hardest things a human being can do. Because the monkey is convincing, it makes every thought feel urgent, every emotion feel like truth, every impulse feel like a need. He says the practice of mindfulness, of returning to the breath, returning to the body, returning to what is actually happening right now, is how you slowly, gradually take the power back from the monkey. You don't kill it, you don't cage it, you just stop obeying it. And over time, something shifts. The monkey doesn't disappear, it never disappears, but it gets quieter. The gaps between the swings get longer. You start to notice thoughts before they become reactions. You start to catch the craving before it becomes a compulsion. Buddha wasn't teaching people to empty their minds. He was teaching them to stop being hostages to their own thinking. There's a massive difference between those two things. The mind is a tool, but most people, he argues, are being used by it, not the other way around. A man gets shot with a poisoned arrow. He's bleeding out. The poison's moving through his body. A surgeon stands right there, ready to pull it out and save his life. But the man refuses. He won't let the surgeon touch him, not until he knows who shot the arrow. What caste was the archer? Was he tall or short? Dark-skinned or fair? What kind of bow did he use? Was the arrowhead made of iron or bone? What feathers were on the shaft? And Buddha says, that man will die, not because the arrow killed him, because his questions did. This is one of Buddha's most brutal teachings. And it's not about arrows, it's about you. It's about the way people deal with suffering, or rather, the way they avoid dealing with it. Buddha argues that most people live exactly like this man. They're hit, life wounds them, and instead of addressing the wound directly, they spiral into questions that have nothing to do with healing. Why did this happen to me? What's the meaning behind all this? Is there a God who allowed this? What happens after I die? Is the universe infinite or finite? He doesn't say those questions are stupid. He says they're irrelevant, at least right now, because right now you're bleeding. This parable comes from the Kula Malunkovada Sutta, where a monk named Malunkyaputta confronts Buddha with a list of metaphysical demands. He wants answers. Is the universe eternal or not? Is the soul the same as the body or different? Does an enlightened person exist after death or not? And Buddha doesn't answer a single one. Not because he can't, because he refuses to play that game. He points out that his teaching was never designed to satisfy intellectual curiosity. It was built for one thing, the cessation of suffering. Everything else? noise. He tells Malankya-Putta plainly, whether the universe is eternal or not, there is still birth, aging, sickness, and death. There is still sorrow, grief, and despair. And his teaching deals with those things, only those things. And here's where it gets really sharp. Buddha warns that the spiritual path itself can become a trap. People spend entire lifetimes debating theology, constructing elaborate belief systems, arguing over doctrines, and never once deal with the arrow in their chest. The questions become a distraction, disguised as depth, disguised as seeking. He's essentially saying you don't need to understand the entire universe to stop hurting. You don't need to solve every philosophical puzzle before you take action on your own pain. The arrow is in you. Pull it out. That's the work. This is Buddha operating as a psychologist, not a philosopher. He's not interested in building grand theories about the nature of reality. He's interested in what works, what actually reduces suffering, right here, right now. And he argues that clinging to unanswerable questions is itself a form of suffering, a way of staying stuck while feeling like you're making progress. There's something ruthless about this teaching. It strips away every excuse. Every, but first I need to understand, gets cut off. Buddha says the path doesn't require total understanding. It requires action, practice, direct, honest engagement with your own mind and its patterns. And the deeper implication is hard to ignore. Most of the things people argue about, in religion, in philosophy, in everyday life, are poisoned arrow questions. They feel urgent. They feel important. They feel like they matter more than anything. But they're keeping you from the one thing that actually matters, dealing with the wound. Buddha doesn't care what you believe about the archer. He doesn't care what the arrow's made of. He cares whether you survive. Most people think karma is some kind of cosmic revenge system. You do something bad happens to you. You do something good, you get rewarded. Like the universe is keeping score on a whiteboard somewhere. Buddha never said that. What he actually taught was far more unsettling and far more useful. Buddha argues that karma isn't punishment. It isn't reward. It's cause and effect applied to the mind. Every action you take, every word you speak, every thought you entertain, it leaves a mark, not on some celestial ledger, on you, on the kind of person you're slowly becoming. That's the part people miss. He points out that when you lie, the immediate consequence isn't that the universe sends bad luck your way. The consequence is that you become a person who lies more easily. The mental resistance drops, the threshold lowers, and before you know it, dishonesty isn't something you do, it's something you are. Same with anger, same with greed, same with kindness, same with patience. Buddha treats karma like a feedback loop built into human psychology. You act a certain way, and that action reinforces a pattern in your mind. That pattern shapes your next action, and the next, and the next, until the pattern becomes your personality, and your personality becomes your life. He's not talking about mystical energy floating around the cosmos. He's talking about neurological grooves being carved into your brain, one decision at a time. And here's where it gets brutal. Buddha warns that most people are running on autopilot. They're not choosing their actions. They're replaying old patterns, reactions inherited from past behavior, past conditioning, past habits. So they're not really living. They're just repeating over and over. And each repetition deepens the groove, makes it harder to break free. That's what he means by the cycle, not some poetic metaphor, a mechanical, psychological trap. But he doesn't stop there. He also argues that karma works in the other direction, deliberately. If destructive patterns can be reinforced, so can constructive ones. Every time you choose patience over reaction, awareness over impulse, stillness over chaos, you're carving a new groove, a new default. And over time, that groove becomes just as automatic as the old one. So karma, the way Buddha frames it, isn't about deserving what happens to you. It's about understanding that you are what you repeatedly do, and more importantly, you are what you repeatedly think. He goes even deeper than action. Buddha argues that the intention behind the action is what really matters. Two people can do the exact same thing, give money to someone in need, but if one does it out of genuine compassion and the other does it to look good, the karmic imprint is completely different because the mind was in a completely different state. And it's the state of the mind that shapes the pattern, not the external act. This is what separates Buddha's teaching on karma from every shallow interpretation out there. He doesn't care about the surface. He cares about the root, and the root is always the mind. He points out that you can't control what happens to you. You can't control other people. You can't control the world, but you can control your responses, your intentions, the quality of your attention. And that's where karma actually lives, in the space between stimulus and response, not in the stars, not in fate, not in divine justice, in you. Every single moment, you're either reinforcing the person you've been or building the person you could become. And Buddha makes one thing very clear: no one else is doing this to you. No one else can fix it for you. You are both the architect and the architecture. Of all the ideas Buddha put forward, this one cuts the deepest, and it's the one most people resist the hardest. He called it anatta, no self. Not low self-esteem, not be humble. He argued something far more radical, that the self you think you are doesn't actually exist. The person you've spent your entire life building, protecting, defending, Buddha says it's a fabrication, a story your mind tells on repeat until you believe it's real, and that should disturb you. Think about it. Every decision you make, every conflict you get into, every anxiety that keeps you up at night, almost all of it traces back to one thing: the ego, the I. I was disrespected. I deserve more. I'm not enough. I need to prove myself. Buddha looked at all of that and pointed to the root. He didn't say the ego is bad. He said something worse. He said it's not even real. Here's how he broke it down. He asked a simple question. What exactly are you? Are you your body? It changes every single day. Cells die, new ones form. The body you had 10 years ago is literally not the body you have now, so that's not you. Are you your thoughts? They shift by the minute. You think one thing in the morning, the opposite by night. Are you your emotions? They rise, they fall, they contradict each other constantly. Are you your memories? They're unreliable, distorted, half-constructed. Buddha went through every layer a person could cling to and showed none of it holds up. There's no fixed, permanent thing sitting at the center of your experience that you can point to and say, that's me. What you call I is just a bundle of processes, constantly moving, constantly shifting, held together by nothing but habit and repetition. And here's why he considered this so critical. Because the ego, this illusion, is the source of almost all suffering. He argued that the moment you construct a self, you immediately create something that needs to be protected, something that can be threatened, something that can be insulted, rejected, humiliated. You build a fortress around something that was never there, and then you spend your whole life defending it. That's the trap. Someone criticizes you, and it burns. Why? Because you've tied your identity to an image. Someone ignores you. and it stings. Why? Because the ego demands to be seen. You compare yourself to others, you chase validation, you fear failure. All of it feeds back to this one illusion. Buddha didn't just observe this, he dissected it, like a surgeon. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. He wasn't saying you should destroy the ego. He was saying there's nothing to destroy. You're fighting a ghost. The whole struggle, becoming someone, proving yourself, building an identity, it's a war with no enemy. And most people never see it. They go through life completely fused with this mental construction. They don't question it, they don't examine it, they just react from it, over and over. Buddha's point wasn't nihilistic. He wasn't saying nothing matters. He was saying, when you stop clinging to a fixed self, something opens up. You stop being so fragile. You stop taking everything so personally. You respond to life instead of constantly reacting to it. He saw the ego for what it was, not a truth, not a core, just a pattern, a deeply convincing one, but a pattern all the same. And the moment you see that, really see it, everything shifts. Most people think Buddha's teachings are all about detachment, letting go, pulling away from the world. And yeah, that's part of it. But here's what gets overlooked. He also laid down a framework for how to engage with other human beings, not as a suggestion, as a foundational practice. He called them the Brahma-viharas, the 4 Immeasurables. And they're not soft, they're not sentimental, they're rigorous mental disciplines. The first one is metta, loving kindness. But don't let that word fool you. Buddha wasn't talking about being nice. He wasn't talking about smiling at strangers or posting kind words online. He was talking about a deliberate, trained orientation of the mind, where you actively generate goodwill toward every living being, not just the people you like, not just the people who are easy to love, everyone, including the people who've wronged you, including the people you can't stand. That's the hard part, and he knew it. He argues that hatred, resentment, hostility, these aren't just moral failures, they're mental poisons. They don't damage the person you direct them at, they damage you. Metta is the antidote, not because it's virtuous, because it's functional. A mind soaked in ill will cannot see clearly, period. The second is karuna, compassion, and again, not the greeting card version. Buddha describes compassion as the willingness to face suffering directly, other people's suffering, not to fix it, not to rescue anyone, but to witness it without turning away, without armoring up, without making it about yourself. He points out that most people confuse compassion with pity. Pity looks down. Compassion stands beside. There's a massive difference. The third is mudita, sympathetic joy. This one might be the hardest of all, because what Buddha's asking here is radical. He's asking you to feel genuine happiness when other people succeed, when other people get what you want, when other people thrive and you're still struggling. Think about that for a second. How often does someone else's success trigger something ugly in you? Envy, comparison, bitterness? He warns that this reflex, this inability to feel joy for others, is one of the most corrosive patterns in the human mind. Mudita is the direct counter. It trains you to break free from the zero-sum thinking that says someone else's gain is your loss. And the fourth is upekkha, equanimity. This is the one that holds everything together, because without it, the other three collapse. Loving kindness without equanimity becomes attachment. Compassion without equanimity becomes burnout. Joy without equanimity becomes dependency on external outcomes. Upekkha is the ability to remain balanced, steady, not indifferent, That's a common misread. Buddha is very clear about this. Equanimity is not apathy. It's not checking out. It's the capacity to stay present, stay engaged, stay open, without being thrown around by every emotional wave that hits you. He argues that these 4 states aren't feelings you wait around to experience. They're skills. You train them daily, the same way you'd train a muscle. You sit down, you direct your attention, and you practice generating each one. First toward yourself, then toward people you love, then toward strangers, then toward difficult people, and eventually toward all beings without distinction. That last part is what makes them immeasurable. There's no boundary, no limit, no cutoff point where you get to say, that person doesn't deserve my goodwill. Buddha treats these 4 qualities as the baseline operating system for a healthy mind, not the ceiling, the floor, the non-negotiable starting point. Without them, he suggests, every other practice, meditation, mindfulness, wisdom, is built on sand. Pain is unavoidable. Buddha never pretends otherwise. He doesn't promise a life free from hardship, loss, or discomfort. That's not the point. The point is something far more unsettling and far more useful. He argues that when something painful happens, that's the first arrow. Someone insults you, you lose something you love, your body breaks down. The event itself, that's the hit. And yes, it hurts. Buddha never denies that. But then something else happens, almost immediately. The mind kicks in, and it starts adding, layer after layer after layer. Why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? This isn't fair. This will never get better. I can't handle this. That's the second arrow. And here's what Buddha says. You shot that one yourself. The first arrow is the event. The second arrow is your reaction to it, the story you build around it, the resentment, the self-pity, the catastrophizing, the obsessive replaying, all of it second arrows, fired from the inside. And Buddha's observation is brutally simple. Most people don't suffer once, they suffer twice, sometimes 100 times. Because they keep pulling the string back and letting go, over and over, long after the original pain has passed. He points out something uncomfortable. An untrained person and a trained person both get hit by the first arrow. Both feel the sting. They're buried under something far heavier than what actually happened. The trained person, they feel it, fully. They don't pretend it doesn't hurt. But they don't add to it. They don't chase it with a story. They let the arrow land, and they don't reach for another one. That distinction is everything. Buddha isn't saying don't feel. He's saying stop manufacturing extra suffering on top of what's already there. The grief is real. The loss is real. But the mental spiral that follows, that's optional. That's a choice, even if it doesn't feel like one. And this is where he operates less like a spiritual teacher and more like a surgeon of the mind. He's isolating the wound from the infection. The wound, the first arrow, might be unavoidable, but the infection, the second arrow, that spreads only because the mind lets it. He warns that most human beings live their entire lives without ever recognizing this distinction. They assume the suffering is one seamless thing. Something bad happens, and the avalanche of mental anguish that follows feels like part of the event itself. But it's not. Buddha separates the two with ruthless precision. The event is one thing. Your narrative about the event is another thing entirely. And the real damage? It's almost always the narrative. So what does he prescribe? Awareness. Not positive thinking, not suppression, not pretending everything's fine, just the raw, honest ability to notice, in real time, when the mind is reaching for that second arrow, to catch it, to see it for what it is. Not to fight it, just to see it. Because the moment a person sees the second arrow clearly, really sees it, they stop firing it so automatically. The grip loosens. Not all at once, but it loosens. That's the teaching. Pain is inevitable, but the war you wage against it inside your own head, that's where the real suffering lives. And Buddha says, with absolute certainty, that war is one you can learn to stop fighting. This is where Buddha breaks from almost every tradition that came before him, and most that came after. No eternal God running the show, no immortal soul tucked inside you waiting to be saved, no fixed, permanent self sitting behind your eyes, pulling the levers. Nothing. And he doesn't say this to be provocative. He says it because he looked, closely, ruthlessly, and couldn't find one. This is anatta, the doctrine of no self, and it's probably the most radical claim Buddha ever made. Here's the setup. In his time, the dominant belief was in Atman, a permanent, unchanging soul, the true you underneath all the noise, eternal, indestructible, the thing that survives death and carries on. Buddha rejected it, flatly. He argues there is no Atman, no core, no essence, no little passenger riding inside the body. What people call self is actually a process, a constantly shifting assembly of parts, and none of those parts, individually or collectively, qualify as a permanent you. He broke it down into 5 components, the 5 aggregates, the skandhas: form, your physical body; flesh, bones, nerve endings, the hardware; sensation, the raw feeling tone of every experience, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, happening constantly, changing constantly; perception, the labeling function, the mind recognizing this is a sound, this is red, this is danger, quick, automatic, and always filtering; mental formations, your intentions, emotions, habits, reactions, the churning machinery of thought and will; anger, desire, doubt, all of it arising and passing; consciousness, awareness of the other 4, the knowing faculty, but not some pure, detached witness. It's conditioned too. It shifts. It depends on what it's conscious of. Buddha's point is sharp. Look at any one of these. Is it permanent? No. Is it unchanging? No. Is it fully under your control? No. So which one is you? None of them. And all 5 together don't suddenly produce a self either. That's like saying 5 rivers flowing into a valley become a lake that was always there. They don't. The lake is just what the movement looks like from a distance. He warns that clinging to the idea of a self, treating any of these aggregates as me or mine, is the very mechanism that generates suffering. You protect what you think you are. You fear losing what you think you are. And that fear, that grasping, that desperate identification, that's the trap. Now, about God. Buddha's position here is often misunderstood. He didn't launch arguments against a creator deity the way some philosophers do. He simply set the question aside. He considered it irrelevant to the problem he was solving. Suffering is here, the cause is here, the way out is here. Whether or not a God exists doesn't change the diagnosis or the cure. He had a term for these kinds of metaphysical distractions. He called them questions that do not tend toward edification. You're bleeding out, and you want to know the biography of the guy who made the arrow. Pull the arrow out first. So then, who are you? Buddha's answer is unsettling. You're not a thing. You're a process, a verb pretending to be a noun, a river calling itself a rock. And the moment you truly see that, not intellectually, but experientially, the grip loosens, the fear softens, because you stop defending something that was never there to begin with. There's a story from Buddha's time that doesn't comfort you. It breaks you open, and that's the point. A woman named Kisa Gotami lost her child. Her baby died, and she did what any mother consumed by grief would do. She refused to accept it. She carried the dead child through the streets, door to door, begging for medicine. Someone, anyone, give me something to bring my child back. People thought she'd lost her mind, and maybe she had. Grief does that. Eventually, someone directed her to Buddha, and here's where most spiritual teachers would have offered soothing words, some reassurance about the afterlife, some promise that the pain would pass. Buddha did none of that. He told her he could help, but he needed one thing first, a mustard seed, just a single mustard seed. But, and this is where the whole thing turns, it had to come from a household where no one had ever died. No parent, no child, no spouse, no sibling, nobody. Simple enough, right? So Kisa Gotami went. She knocked on the first door. They had mustard seeds, but the father had died 2 years ago. She went to the next house. They'd lost a daughter. The next, a grandfather. The next, a brother. House after house after house. Every single door she knocked on had been touched by death. Every single one. She never found the seed. And somewhere in that search, something broke through the grief. Not because someone told her to move on, not because someone explained death to her philosophically, but because she saw it with her own eyes. In every home, in every face, death wasn't something that had singled her out. Death was the one thing every human being shared. Buddha didn't lecture her. He let reality teach her. And that's what makes this parable so devastating. He argues, through this story, that suffering is not personal. It feels personal. God, does it feel personal? When you're the one holding the dead child, when you're the one whose world just collapsed, it feels like the universe has chosen you for punishment. But Buddha says no. He says suffering is the baseline. It's woven into the fabric of being alive, not as a curse, not as a punishment, just as a fact. He points out that the deepest pain doesn't come from loss itself. It comes from the belief that you were supposed to be exempt from it, that somehow your love was supposed to be the exception. Your family, your life, that's the real wound. The expectation that reality should bend to your wishes. And what did Kisa Gotami do after she understood? She buried her child. She returned to Buddha, and she began to learn. Not because the grief vanished, it didn't, but because the isolation of grief dissolved. She was no longer alone in her suffering. She was part of something much larger, the entire human condition. Buddha uses this story to make a point that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You will lose the people you love. You will lose your health. You will lose everything you've built, and so will everyone else. That's not pessimism. He argues it's the starting line, because only when you stop fighting that truth can you actually begin to live with any depth. He wasn't cruel to Kisa Gotami. He was honest with her. And sometimes honesty is the most compassionate thing you can offer a person drowning in denial. The mustard seed was never meant to be found. The search was the teaching. Before Buddha was Buddha, he was a prince, Siddhartha Gautama. born into extreme luxury, silk robes, palace walls, every pleasure available to him before he could even ask for it. His father made sure of that, kept the outside world hidden, kept suffering invisible. The plan was simple: give the boy everything, and he'll never want to leave. It didn't work. Siddhartha left, and when he did, he swung hard in the opposite direction. He became an ascetic, starved himself, slept on thorns, pushed his body to the edge of death. For 6 years, he punished himself in the name of spiritual progress. The logic was, if pleasure didn't lead to truth, maybe pain would. That didn't work either. And this is where Buddha's sharpest insight is born. Not from success, from failure. He tried both extremes, total indulgence and total self-denial, and both left him empty. Both were traps. So he sat down, ate a meal, and chose a third option, the middle way. Now, most people hear middle way and think it means moderation, balance. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little. And sure, on the surface, that's part of it, but Buddha argues something far deeper than that. He's not giving dietary advice. He's making a claim about how the human mind works. He says the mind is naturally pulled toward extremes. That's its default setting. You either chase pleasure or run from pain. You cling or you reject. You obsess over something or you avoid it completely. And both responses, clinging and aversion, are the same disease wearing different masks. They both keep you locked in a cycle of reactivity. You're not free in either state. You're just bouncing between walls. The middle way isn't about finding a comfortable spot between two extremes. It's about stepping off the spectrum entirely. Buddha argues that the real problem isn't pleasure or pain. It's the compulsive relationship you have with both, the way you grip one and shove the other away. That grip? That's where suffering lives. And he backs this up with a specific framework, the Noble Eightfold Path. Right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. 8 practices that form the structure of the middle way. Not commandments, not rules handed down from above. Tools, mental tools for navigating reality without being destroyed by it. But here's what makes this genuinely radical. Buddha doesn't say deny yourself joy. He doesn't say pleasure is evil. He says stop needing it. There's a difference between enjoying something and being enslaved by it, between experiencing pain and being consumed by it. The middle way is that difference. It's the ability to move through life without being yanked around by every feeling, every craving, every fear. He warns that extremes feel productive. They feel serious. The person drowning in luxury thinks they've won. The ascetic starving on a mountaintop thinks they've transcended. But Buddha says both are asleep. Both are reacting, not choosing. The middle way is about waking up and choosing deliberately. And there's a psychological precision to this that's hard to ignore. Buddha essentially identified what modern psychology calls emotional dysregulation, the tendency to swing between extremes, and offered a structured path out of it, 2,500 years before anyone used that term. He didn't arrive at the middle way through theory. He arrived at it through exhaustion. He burned through every extreme and found nothing at either end. And what he built from that failure wasn't a religion. It was a practice, a way of engaging with your own mind that doesn't require you to destroy yourself or lose yourself in the process. There's a distinction Buddha makes that once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Pain and suffering are not the same thing. Most people use those words interchangeably, like they're synonyms. Buddha says no, they're two completely different processes, and confusing them is one of the most expensive mistakes a human being can make. Here's how he breaks it down. Pain is the raw event, the loss, the injury, the betrayal, the failure, the thing that happens to you. It's unavoidable. You're alive, so you will experience pain. Buddha never pretends otherwise. He doesn't sugarcoat existence. In fact, he opens his entire teaching with it. Life involves suffering. That's his starting point. Not a hopeful quote, not a warm welcome, a cold, hard diagnosis. But then he draws the line. Pain is the first arrow. It hits you. You didn't choose it. You couldn't dodge it. It's just part of being human. Suffering, and this is where Buddha's insight cuts deep, suffering is the second arrow. And that one, you shoot it at yourself. He argues that suffering is what the mind does with pain. It's the story you build around it. The obsessive replaying, the why me, the catastrophizing, the clinging to how things should have been instead of sitting with how they are. The first arrow draws blood. The second arrow is what keeps the wound open for years. And here's the uncomfortable part. Buddha points out that most people don't even feel the first arrow clearly. They're so busy firing the second one that they never actually process the original pain. They layer anxiety on top of it, resentment on top of that, self-pity on top of that. Until the original event, the actual pain, is buried under a mountain of mental construction. That mountain, that's suffering. And it's almost entirely self-generated. He's not saying just think positive. He's not saying pain doesn't matter. He's saying something much harder to accept, that your relationship with pain determines the quality of your entire life, not the pain itself. Two people can go through the exact same experience. One processes it, feels it fully, and moves through it. The other grabs onto it, builds an identity around it, and carries it for decades. Same event, wildly different outcomes. Buddha argues the difference isn't strength or weakness, it's awareness. One person sees the second arrow coming. The other doesn't even know they're holding the bow. And that's what makes this teaching so ruthless. Because it puts the responsibility squarely on you, not on the event, not on the person who hurt you, not on circumstances, on your own mind, on what you do after the pain arrives. Buddha doesn't say this to blame anyone. He says it to free them. Because if suffering is something the world does to you, you're powerless. But if suffering is something your mind adds to pain, then you have leverage. You have a point of intervention. You can learn to feel the first arrow without automatically firing the second. That's not easy. He never says it's easy, but he does say it's possible. And that possibility, that tiny gap between pain and your reaction to it, is where all of his training is aimed. Meditation, mindfulness, awareness, all of it exists to widen that gap, to give you just enough space to see the second arrow before it flies. Not to eliminate pain, never that, but to stop multiplying it, to stop being the source of your own ongoing damage. Pain visits, suffering moves in, and Buddha says, you're the one who opened the door. Most people hear the word samsara and think reincarnation, past lives, coming back as something else. And sure, that's part of the traditional framework. But Buddha's teaching on samsara goes way deeper than that. And you don't need to believe in rebirth to feel the weight of what he was pointing at. He described samsara as a wheel, a cycle, not just of life and death, but of patterns. The same mental loops, the same emotional reactions, the same suffering, dressed up in different circumstances, playing out again and again. You get what you want, and it's not enough. You lose what you love, and you crumble. You chase, you grasp, you fear, you repeat. That's the wheel. And Buddha argued that most people are stuck on it without even knowing they're spinning. Here's what makes his analysis so sharp. He didn't just say life is repetitive. He mapped out exactly how the cycle works. He laid out what's known as the 12 links of dependent origination, a chain of causes and effects that keep the wheel turning. It starts with ignorance, not stupidity, ignorance of how things actually work. From that ignorance come mental formations, habitual patterns of thought. From those come consciousness, perception, contact, feeling, craving, clinging. One leads to the next, mechanically, automatically, like dominoes falling in a circle, with no beginning and no end. And craving sits right at the heart of it. Buddha zeroed in on this. He argued that craving for pleasure, for existence, for non-existence, is the fuel that keeps the wheel spinning. You experience something pleasant, and immediately the mind grabs for more. You experience something painful, and the mind pushes it away. That grabbing and pushing, that's not a choice. It's a reflex, and it's the reflex that traps you. But what makes samsara so brutal isn't the suffering itself, it's the repetition. Buddha pointed out that people don't just suffer. They suffer the same way, over and over. Same insecurities, same triggers, same emotional collapses. Different year, different relationship, different job, same pain. The scenery changes, the cycle doesn't. And he was ruthless about this. He didn't offer comfort, he offered clarity. He said, look at your life. Really look. How many times have you repeated the same mistake? How many times have you chased the same thing, expecting a different result? How many times have you told yourself, this time it'll be different, and it wasn't? That's samsara, not some cosmic punishment, not some mystical loop across lifetimes. It's happening right now. In real time, every day you operate on autopilot, reacting from the same conditioning, running the same scripts. You're on the wheel. And the worst part? Buddha warned that the wheel feels normal. It feels like life. You don't notice you're trapped because everyone around you is trapped too. The cycle disguises itself as routine, as just the way things are. That's what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't look like a prison. It looks like Monday morning. So what did he propose? Not escape through force, not willpower, awareness. He argued that the wheel keeps turning because you don't see it turning. The moment you start to see the pattern, really see it, not intellectually, but experientially, the chain starts to weaken. You catch the craving before it becomes clinging. You catch the reaction before it becomes a spiral. Buddha didn't promise a way out of pain. He pointed to a way out of repetition. And for him, that distinction made all the difference. Before getting into what Buddha actually taught, there's something you need to know. His teachings weren't written down during his lifetime. Not a single word. Buddha never sat down and wrote a book. He spoke. For 45 years, he spoke. And after he died, his followers gathered, and they remembered, they recited, they organized, and what they put together became the Tripitaka. The word itself means 3 baskets, literally, 3 collections of teachings, each serving a different purpose. Buddha's complete operating manual for the human mind, broken into 3 parts. The first basket is the Vinaya Pitaka. This is the rule book. Buddha laid down a code of conduct, not as arbitrary commandments, but as a disciplined structure for living. It was originally meant for monks and nuns, the people who had committed fully to the path. He argues that without discipline, everything else falls apart. You can understand the deepest truths about existence, but if your daily behavior is chaotic, none of it sticks. The Vinaya covers everything from how to eat to how to resolve disputes within a community. It sounds rigid, and it is, but Buddha designed it that way on purpose. He warns that the untrained mind will always find excuses, always drift toward comfort. The Vinaya removes the option. The second basket is the Sutta Pitaka. This is the core, the actual teachings, the conversations, the sermons, the dialogues that they had with everyone, kings, beggars, scholars, farmers. This is where you find the heavy stuff, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the nature of suffering, the nature of the self. He didn't lecture in abstractions. He spoke to people directly, adapting his message to whoever stood in front of him. A grieving mother got a different lesson than a proud warrior, but the underlying diagnosis was always the same. You are suffering because you don't understand how your own mind works. The Sutta Pitaka is massive, thousands of discourses, and it's not organized like a neat philosophy textbook. It's raw, repetitive at times, circling back to the same core truths again and again. Buddha did that deliberately. He points out that people don't learn from hearing something once. They learn from hearing it until it finally breaks through. The third basket is the Abhidhamma Pitaka. This one's different. No storytelling, no rules, pure analysis, a systematic breakdown of the mind, of consciousness, of reality itself. If the Sutta Pitaka is Buddha the teacher talking to everyday people, the Abhidhamma is Buddha the psychologist, dissecting human experience with surgical precision. It categorizes mental states, maps out how thoughts arise and dissolve, breaks perception down into its smallest components. Most people skip this basket. It's dense, technical, not easy reading. But it's arguably the most remarkable part, because it reveals that Buddha wasn't just offering spiritual comfort. He was building a complete model of how the human mind operates, centuries before modern psychology even had a name. So that's the Tripitaka, 3 baskets, one for discipline, one for teaching, one for deep analysis. Together, they form the foundation of everything Buddha left behind. And here's what matters. None of it was meant to be worshipped. He never intended these words to become sacred scripture people just bow to and recite blindly. He meant for them to be used, tested, applied. Buddha makes this explicit. Don't believe something because I said it. Believe it because you tried it and it worked. That's the framework. Now let's get into what it actually contains. Most philosophers, when confronted with the God question, pick a side. They argue for, they argue against, they build elaborate systems of logic to prove or disprove the existence of a supreme being. Buddha did none of that, and that's what makes his response so remarkable. When asked directly whether God exists, Buddha simply refused to answer. Not because he didn't know, not because he was dodging, but because he saw the question itself as a trap, a well-disguised distraction dressed up as depth. He called these the unanswerable questions, questions about God, about whether the universe is eternal, about what happens after death. And he deliberately set them aside. Not dismissed them, set them aside. There's a difference. He wasn't saying these questions are stupid. He was saying they're dangerous because they eat up the one resource you don't have enough of, time. See, Buddha argues that the human mind has a deep, almost compulsive addiction. It craves certainty about things it cannot verify. It wants answers to questions that have zero practical bearing on how you live, how you suffer, how you heal. And he saw this craving for metaphysical certainty as just another form of attachment, another chain, Another way the mind keeps itself busy so it doesn't have to face what's actually wrong. He makes this point with one of the sharpest analogies in the history of philosophy, the parable of the poisoned arrow. A man is shot with a poisoned arrow. He's dying. A doctor arrives, ready to pull it out and save his life. But the man stops him. He says, "Wait, before you remove it, I need to know who shot this arrow, what caste were they, what kind of wood is the bow made from, what feathers are on the shaft." Buddha's point is brutal in its clarity, that man will die before he gets his answers. And that's exactly what humans do with the God question. They spend entire lifetimes debating the origin of the arrow, while the poison spreads. He argues that suffering is the arrow. It's real, it's here, it's now. And whether God exists or doesn't exist changes nothing about the fact that you're in pain. The arrow still needs to come out. But here's what's important. This wasn't atheism, and it wasn't agnosticism either. Buddha wasn't saying God doesn't exist. He wasn't saying he does. He was saying something far more radical, that the question itself is irrelevant to the work that actually matters. He points out that people use the God question as a way to avoid doing the hard internal work. They outsource their suffering to a higher power, or they rage against the absence of one. Either way, they're distracted. Either way, the arrow stays in. And here's where it gets really sharp. Buddha warns that clinging to any belief, even a spiritual one, is still clinging. If you hold on to the idea of God as a comfort blanket, that's attachment. If you hold on to atheism as an identity, that's also attachment. Both keep you stuck. Both keep you from seeing things as they actually are. His position is essentially this: stop asking questions you can't answer and start dealing with what's right in front of you. The mind is on fire. Craving is burning you alive, and no theological debate, no matter how sophisticated, is going to put out that flame. What Buddha did with the God question wasn't evasion, it was surgery. He cut away everything that didn't serve the immediate goal, the end of suffering. He stripped philosophy down to its most functional core, and in doing so, he gave an answer more powerful than yes or no ever could be. He said, "Wrong question." So Buddha identifies the problem, suffering. He diagnoses the cause, craving and attachment. He even confirms there's a way out. But he doesn't stop there. He hands you the actual blueprint, step by step. No mystery, no mysticism, just a clear, structured path. 8 steps. That's what he calls the Eightfold Path. And he calls it the middle way because it avoids both extremes, extreme indulgence and extreme self-denial. Neither works, he says. This path walks right between them. And here's what most people get wrong about it. They hear path and they think it's linear. Step 1, then step 2, then step 3. It's not. Buddha designs it as a simultaneous practice, all 8 working together at once, like 8 spokes of a wheel. Remove one, the whole thing collapses. You don't graduate from one to the next, you hold them all. He groups them into 3 categories: wisdom, ethical conduct, mental discipline, and each one feeds into the others. Let's start with wisdom. The first spoke, right view. Buddha argues that everything begins with how you see reality, not how you wish it was, not the story you tell yourself, but how things actually are. Impermanent, unsatisfying when clung to, without a fixed self. If your view of reality is distorted, every decision you make, every action you take, it'll be built on a lie. He's saying, get your perception straight first. That's the foundation. The second spoke, right intention. Seeing clearly isn't enough. You have to decide what to do with that clarity. Buddha points out that your intentions shape your entire life. Are you driven by greed, By ill will? By cruelty? Or are you moving toward renunciation, goodwill, and compassion? He's not asking you to be a saint. He's asking you to be brutally honest about what's actually driving your choices, because the direction of your mind determines the direction of your life. Then comes ethical conduct, right speech, right action, right livelihood. And Buddha doesn't frame these as moral commandments handed down from above. He treats them as practical tools for a stable mind. He argues that lying, harsh words, gossip, they don't just hurt others, they poison your own mind. Right action? Don't kill, don't steal, don't exploit. Not because some cosmic judge is watching, but because these behaviors create internal chaos. They stir up guilt, anxiety, fear. And right livelihood, he warns against earning a living in ways that cause harm. Your work isn't separate from your mental state. It feeds it every single day. And then, mental discipline. This is where it gets deeply psychological. Right effort. Buddha acknowledges something most people ignore, that the mind doesn't just change because you want it to. You have to work at it, deliberately. He talks about preventing unwholesome states from arising, letting go of the ones already there, cultivating wholesome states, and sustaining them once they show up. It's not passive, it's constant, active mental labor. Right mindfulness. This is probably the most misunderstood teaching he ever gave. People hear mindfulness and they think relaxation, calm, peace, but that's not what Buddha means. He means awareness, raw, unflinching awareness of your body, your feelings, your mental states, your thoughts. You watch them without clinging, without pushing away. You just see them for what they are. And in that seeing, their grip on you loosens. Right concentration, the final spoke. Deep, focused meditation. Not daydreaming, not zoning out. A trained, disciplined mind that can hold its attention exactly where it chooses. Buddha argues this is where real transformation happens, in the stillness of a mind that's no longer scattered, no longer reactive. And here's what's striking about the whole thing. There's no faith required, no ritual, no priest, no dogma. It's a self-directed system of mental and behavioral restructuring. Buddha essentially builds a cognitive behavioral framework, 25 centuries before modern psychology even had a name for it. He doesn't ask you to believe, he asks you to practice. Most people think suffering is something that happens to them. A bad breakup, a lost job, a betrayal, something outside, something inflicted. Buddha disagreed completely. He called it dukkha, and it doesn't translate neatly into suffering. It's deeper than that, more like a persistent unsatisfactoriness, a low hum of discontent that runs underneath everything. Even the good moments, especially the good moments, because somewhere in the back of your mind, you know they won't last. And that's the first crack in the wall Buddha points at. He argues that the problem was never the pain itself. It's what your mind does with the pain. The story it tells, the resistance it builds, the desperate clinging to how things should be instead of how they actually are. He identifies 3 forces behind this, 3 mental habits that keep you locked in a cycle you didn't even know you were in. Craving, aversion, and ignorance. Craving is the easy one to spot. You want something, you get it. And almost immediately, you want more, or you want it to stay exactly as it is. Buddha saw this not as greed, but as a fundamental misunderstanding of how reality works. You're reaching for things that by their very nature cannot be held. Aversion is the flip side. You push away what's uncomfortable. Pain, discomfort, difficult emotions. But Buddha warns, the pushing away is itself a form of suffering.
You're not just experiencing the pain. You're experiencing the pain plus your war against it. That's 2 layers now. And most people live their entire lives trapped in that second layer without ever realizing it. Then there's ignorance. And he doesn't mean stupidity. He doesn't mean a lack of information. Buddha means something far more fundamental, a misperception of reality itself. You see things as permanent when they're not. You see yourself as a fixed, solid entity when you're not. You build your entire life on assumptions that crumble the moment you actually examine them. This is where Buddha lays down what he considers the architecture of reality itself, the 3 marks of existence. First, anicca, impermanence. Everything changes. Everything. Your body, your thoughts, your relationships. Your identity. He doesn't say this to be poetic or philosophical. He says it as a diagnosis. The reason you suffer is because you treat temporary things as if they're permanent, and when they inevitably shift, you break. Second, dukkha, that persistent unsatisfactoriness. Not just the big, obvious pain, the subtle, gnawing sense that something is always slightly off. Buddha argues this isn't a flaw in life. It's a flaw in perception. You're looking for lasting satisfaction in things that, by their very definition, cannot provide it. Third, anatta, non-self. And this is the one that really trips people up. Buddha argues there is no fixed, unchanging you, no permanent soul sitting at the center of your experience, pulling the levers. What you call self is just a collection of processes, thoughts, sensations, memories, reactions, constantly shifting, constantly rebuilding itself. You're not a noun, you're a verb. And here's what makes this more than abstract philosophy. Buddha isn't describing these marks to be intellectually interesting. He's pointing at the root cause of every unnecessary struggle you've ever had. You suffer because you cling to things that change. You suffer because you demand permanence from an impermanent world. You suffer because you defend a self that doesn't exist the way you think it does. The prison isn't out there. He's saying you built it, brick by brick, thought by thought, and you keep rebuilding it every single day. But, and this is the part most people miss, if you built it, you can take it apart. Buddha starts with something most people don't want to hear. Everything you have right now, your health, your relationships, your money, your mood, even your sense of self, is temporary. All of it. He calls this Anicca, impermanence. And he doesn't present it as some poetic observation about sunsets and seasons. He presents it as a law, a universal, non-negotiable law that governs every single thing in existence. Nothing is exempt. Not your body, not your mind, not the people you love, not the empires humans build, not even the mountains. Everything that arises will at some point fall apart. Buddha argues that this isn't pessimism, it's just reality. And the problem isn't that things change. The problem is that human beings constantly behave as if they won't. That's where the suffering begins. He points out something brutal here. People cling. They cling to pleasure, to people, to status, to youth, to the way things were. And every single time they cling to something impermanent, which is everything, they set themselves up for pain. Not because life is cruel, but because they're fighting a law they cannot win against. It's like standing in a river and demanding the water stop moving. You'll exhaust yourself, you'll drown, but the river won't stop. Buddha treats this as a diagnosis, not a sermon. He's identifying the core glitch in the human operating system. The mind latches on, it grips,
It builds an identity around things that are already in the process of dissolving. And then when those things inevitably dissolve, a relationship ends, a career collapses, the body ages, the mind breaks down. Not because something went wrong, but because it was never built to last in the first place. And here's what makes his analysis sharp. He doesn't just apply impermanence to the obvious stuff, death, loss, aging.
He applies it to everything. Your happiest moment? Temporary. Your worst day? Also temporary. That emotion you're drowning in right now? It'll pass. He argues that once you truly understand this, not intellectually, but deep in your bones, your entire relationship with life changes. You stop gripping so hard.
He warns that most people hear this and misunderstand it. They think he's saying nothing matters. That's not it. He's saying the opposite, actually. He's saying, pay attention precisely because it won't last. Be present with it. Experience it fully. But don't chain yourself to it. Don't confuse something passing through your life with something that defines your life.
There's a psychological precision to this that's hard to ignore. Buddha is essentially describing what happens when expectation meets reality. People expect permanence. Reality delivers change. And in that gap between what they expect and what actually happens, suffering lives. He argues that if you close that gap, if you stop expecting things to stay the same, you don't eliminate pain, but you eliminate a massive amount of unnecessary suffering. He makes a distinction there that matters. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering, the mental resistance to pain, the story you build around it, the refusal to accept what is, that part is optional.
So Anicca isn't a depressing idea. It's a corrective lens. Buddha holds it up and says, look at your life through this, honestly, and you'll see why you suffer where you suffer. You'll see that you've been fighting reality itself, and that fight, you're never going to win it. The only sane move is to stop fighting. Most people think of Buddha as calm, serene, sitting under a tree with a gentle smile. But there's a sermon he gave, one of his earliest, one of his most intense, that sounds nothing like peace. It sounds like a warning siren. It's called the Fire Sermon, and it's arguably the most psychologically aggressive thing Buddha ever said. Here's the setup. He's standing in front of 1,000 former fire-worshipping ascetics at a place called Gaia Head. These aren't casual listeners.
These are men who've spent their entire lives devoted to fire rituals. Fire is sacred to them. Fire is everything. So what does Buddha do? He takes their most sacred symbol and turns it into a diagnosis. He tells them everything is burning. Not metaphorically, not poetically. He means it as a description of the human condition.
Your eyes are burning. Your ears are burning. Your tongue, your body, your mind, burning. Every sensation you experience, every feeling that arises from contact with the world, it's all on fire. And what's the fuel? He names it plainly. Passion. 3 fires. And according to Buddha, they're consuming everything you think, everything you feel, everything you do, every single moment of your life. Now, here's what makes this sermon hit different from typical spiritual teaching. Buddha isn't telling these men to pray the fire away. He isn't offering them a ritual or a mantra. He's doing something far more unsettling. He's asking them to see it. Just see it. Recognize that the burning is already happening, that you're already in the fire. You just haven't noticed because you've been in it so long. It feels normal. And that's the terrifying part. Not the fire itself, the fact that you've mistaken it for warmth. Buddha argues that every sensory experience, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought, he doesn't say this to frighten. He says it to wake people up.
because you can't put out a fire you don't know is burning. And here's the part most people miss about the fire sermon. Buddha doesn't just describe the problem, he points to the exit. He says that when a person truly sees this, truly understands that every attachment, every clinging, every reactive impulse is fuel for suffering, something shifts. He calls it disenchantment, not depression, not nihilism. Disenchantment. You stop being hypnotized by the flames. He says a person who becomes disenchanted becomes dispassionate, and through dispassion, the mind is liberated. The fire goes out, not because someone poured water on it, but because you stopped feeding it. The result of this single sermon? All 1,000 monks listening are said to have attained full liberation on the spot. Whether you take that literally or not doesn't matter. The point lands either way. Buddha wasn't offering comfort, he was offering clarity, brutal, uncompromising clarity. The fire sermon strips away every pleasant illusion about the human experience and says, look at what's actually happening inside you. Your mind is not at peace. It's reactive, grasping, burning. And it will keep burning until you stop pretending it isn't. That's not gentle spirituality. That's confrontational psychology. And that's exactly what Buddha intended it to be.
Buddha tells a story, simple on the surface, devastating underneath. A man is traveling. He comes to a great body of water. The side he's standing on is dangerous, full of threat, full of fear. The other side is safe, but there's no bridge. No boat, no ferryman. So he does what any resourceful person would do. He gathers sticks, branches, leaves, whatever he can find, and he builds a raft. He paddles across. He makes it. He's safe now. And here's where Buddha drops the real question. What does the man do with the raft? Does he put it down? Or does he strap it to his back and carry it everywhere he goes, through forests, up mountains, across dry land, just because it saved his life once? The answer's obvious, right? You'd put it down. No sane person hauls a raft through a forest. But Buddha argues that's exactly what people do. Not with rafts, with ideas, with beliefs. With entire philosophies, even with his own teachings. And that's the part most people miss. He isn't just talking about other people's ideologies, he's talking about his own. He's saying, use my teachings to cross the water. Use them to get from suffering to the other side. But once you've crossed, put them down. Don't worship the raft. Don't build a shrine around it. Don't make it your identity. It was a tool, nothing more. This is a staggering thing for a teacher to say. Most teachers want their words carved in stone. Most systems want loyalty. Most philosophies want you to stay inside them forever. Buddha says the opposite. He warns against clinging, even to the thing that freed you. And he means it. He calls his teachings a raft, not a throne, not a temple, a raft. Something functional, something temporary, something you're supposed to leave behind when the job is done. So what's really going on here? Buddha is making a deeper point about the nature of attachment itself. He points out that the human mind doesn't just attach to bad things, it attaches to good things too, helpful things, true things, and that attachment, even to truth, becomes its own kind of prison if you refuse to let go. Think about that for a second. A belief that once saved you can start to suffocate you. A framework that once gave you clarity can become the very thing that blinds you. Not because it was wrong, but because you held on too long. Because you confused the vehicle with the destination. Buddha's not against learning. He's not against wisdom. He's against fossilizing it. He's against turning fluid insight into rigid dogma. The moment a teaching becomes an identity, I am a Buddhist. I follow this path,
This is the only way. You've strapped the raft to your back, and now the thing that was supposed to free you is weighing you down. He argues that real understanding is not about accumulating more knowledge. It's about knowing when to release what you already have. Growth isn't always addition. Sometimes it's subtraction. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is set down the very thing that got you here. That's uncomfortable because people love their rafts. They polish them, defend them, go to war over them. But Buddha says, let it go. All of it.
Even this, even him, that's not humility for show. That's a man who understood something most never will. The teaching is not the point. The crossing is.
Here's something Buddha figured out 2,500 years ago that modern psychology only gave a name to in the 1970s, the hedonic treadmill. The idea that no matter what you get, no matter what you achieve, your satisfaction resets every single time. You want something, you chase it, you get it, and for a moment, maybe a day, maybe a week, it feels good. Then it doesn't. The new normal sets in. And you want the next thing. Buddha didn't call it a treadmill, but he described the exact same mechanism. He calls it tanha, craving, and he argues it's the engine behind almost all human suffering. Not pain, suffering. He makes a sharp distinction there. Pain is unavoidable. You lose people, you get sick, your body breaks down. That's just the nature of having a body, having a life. But suffering, that's the extra layer. The mental anguish, the constant wanting, the refusal to accept what is because you're always reaching for what isn't. That's tanha at work. And Buddha doesn't just say stop wanting things. That's the shallow reading most people walk away with. He goes deeper. He points out that craving operates on 3 levels. There's craving for sensory pleasure, the obvious one. Food, sex, comfort, entertainment. Then there's craving for existence, the desire to become something, to be someone, to build an identity and have it validated. And then there's the craving for non-existence, wanting to escape, to disappear, to numb out, to not feel what you're feeling. That last one catches people off guard, but Buddha identifies even the desire to check out as just another form of craving, another way the mind runs from the present moment. So it's not just about material things, it's about the architecture of desire itself. He argues that the human mind is wired to be dissatisfied, not broken, wired. Dissatisfaction isn't a glitch, it's the default setting. And every time you satisfy one craving, another surfaces. Not because life is cruel, but because that's how craving works. It doesn't have an endpoint. It feeds itself. This is where Buddha sounds less like a spiritual teacher and more like someone who reverse-engineered human psychology. He warns that people spend entire lifetimes believing the next thing will be the thing that finally makes them feel complete. The next relationship, the next achievement, the next experience, and it never is. Not because those things are bad, but because the mechanism of craving was never designed to be satisfied. It was designed to keep running. And here's the part that hits hard. He points out that even when people recognize this pattern, even when they see it clearly, they still fall for it. Because craving doesn't operate on logic. It operates below logic. It's deeper than thought. It's the pull you feel before you even have time to reason with yourself. Buddha calls this out without any sugarcoating. You are not in control of your desires the way you think you are. So what's the move? Buddha doesn't say suppress it. He doesn't say deny it. He says, see it, clearly, without flinching. He argues that the first step out of any trap is recognizing you're in one. And most people never take that step, not because they can't, But because the treadmill feels so natural, they mistake it for life itself. That recognition, that raw, uncomfortable moment of seeing your own craving for what it is, Buddha treats that as the beginning, not the end, the beginning of something most people never even start. This is probably the most misunderstood thing about Buddha's entire philosophy. People hear Buddhism and they think, oh, it's about killing desire, wanting nothing, sitting still until you become a rock, floating through life with no ambition, no drive, no fire. That's not what Buddha taught, not even close. What he actually identified as the root of suffering wasn't desire itself. It was a very specific kind of desire. He called it tanha. And that word doesn't just mean wanting. It means thirst, craving, that desperate, white-knuckled grip the mind puts on things it believes it needs to be okay. And that distinction changes everything. Buddha argues that there's a massive difference between wanting something and needing something to complete you. You can want a meal without being destroyed when you don't get it. You can want success without making your entire sense of self depend on it. That's healthy. That's human. He never had a problem with that. What he had a problem with was the attachment that rides underneath desire, the silent, unspoken belief that says, I will not be whole until I get this. That's tanha. That's the trap. And here's where his psychology gets razor sharp. He points out that this kind of craving doesn't actually want the thing it's chasing. It wants the feeling it thinks the thing will bring. You don't crave the promotion, you crave the validation. You don't crave the relationship, you crave the sense of being enough. And because the real target is a feeling, something internal, something fleeting, no external thing ever satisfies it. Not permanently. So you get the thing, the relief hits, and then it fades, and the craving comes back, louder, hungrier, pointed at something new. Buddha describes this as a cycle, not a one-time event, a loop. You desire, you chase, you get, you feel relief. The relief dissolves, and the craving returns with a different mask on. He warns that most people live their entire lives inside this loop without ever realizing they're in it. They think each new desire is unique. He says it's the same thirst wearing a different outfit. But, and this is critical, he doesn't say stop wanting. He says stop clinging. There's a concept in his teachings called chanda. It means intention, wholesome motivation, the desire to grow, to learn, to help, to build, without wrapping your identity around the outcome. Buddha himself had desire. He desired to teach. He desired to help people end their suffering. But he held those desires loosely, open hand, not a fist. That's the difference he's drawing. A fist versus an open hand. Both are holding something, but one of them can let go. He argues that the moment you fuse your sense of self with the outcome, I must have this or I'm a failure, you've turned a simple want into a cage. And the cruel part, you built the cage yourself. The bars aren't made of circumstance. They're made of meaning you assign to the circumstance. So his prescription isn't to stop wanting. It's to watch the wanting, see it clearly, understand what's really driving it. And then choose how to respond instead of being dragged. That's what most people miss. Buddha wasn't anti-desire. He was anti-autopilot. He saw that humans don't suffer because they want things. They suffer because they let wanting run them, unconsciously, compulsively, endlessly. The teaching isn't want nothing. The teaching is stop letting your wants own you.
Buddha doesn't sugarcoat anything. He looks at the entirety of existence, every experience, every moment, every life, and he pulls out 3 characteristics that define all of it, not some of it, all of it. He calls them the 3 marks of existence, and they're not comforting. They're not designed to be. They're designed to be true. The first mark, Anicca, impermanence. Buddha argues that nothing lasts. Nothing. Not your body, not your relationships, not your wealth, your status, your health, your youth. Not even your thoughts. Everything that arises will pass away. And he's not saying this as some poetic reflection on the beauty of change. He's saying it as a cold, clinical observation. The thing you're holding on to right now, it's already leaving. It was leaving the moment it arrived. And here's where he goes deeper than most people realize. He doesn't just mean that things end eventually. He means they're changing constantly, right now, every second. Your cells, your mood, your sense of who you are. There is no stable ground anywhere. And the suffering people experience, a massive chunk of it comes from pretending otherwise, from clinging to things as if they'll stay. Buddha warns, the tighter you grip, the more it hurts when it slips. The second mark, dukkha, suffering, or more accurately, unsatisfactoriness. Now, a lot of people hear this and think Buddha is a pessimist, that he's saying life is nothing but pain. But that's a shallow read. What he's actually pointing out is something far more subtle. Even pleasure is dukkha, not because it feels bad, but because it doesn't last. You get what you want, you feel good, and then it fades, and you're left wanting again. That cycle, wanting, getting, losing, wanting, that's dukkha. It's not that life can't contain joy. It's that no joy you find in external things will ever be permanent. And building your entire sense of well-being on something impermanent, Buddha calls that a setup for suffering. Every time. He's not telling you to stop enjoying things. He's telling you to stop expecting them to complete you. There's a difference, a big one. The third mark? Anatta, non-self. And this is the one that really breaks people's minds. Buddha argues that there is no fixed, unchanging self. No soul sitting at the center of your experience, pulling the strings. What you call me, it's a process, a constantly shifting collection of physical sensations, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness. All of it in motion, all of it impermanent. He breaks it down into what he calls the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. And he says, look at each one. Is any of it permanent? Is any of it truly yours? And the answer, every time, is no. This isn't nihilism. Buddha isn't saying you don't exist. He's saying you don't exist the way you think you do. The self you've been defending, protecting, feeding, inflating your whole life, it's a construction, a story the mind tells itself. And that story, it's the root of almost every problem you have. Pride, insecurity, fear of death, jealousy, all of it traces back to a desperate need to protect something that was never solid to begin with. So, what do these 3 marks add up to? A complete demolition of the way most people see reality. Impermanence strips away the illusion of stability. Dukkha strips away the illusion that external things will save you. Anatta strips away the illusion of a fixed identity. Buddha doesn't offer these truths as philosophy to be debated. He offers them as observations to be verified. Personally, through direct experience, he's saying, don't take my word for it. Look closely and see for yourself what's actually there. Most people won't, and that, he'd say, is exactly the problem. Buddha didn't invent impermanence. He just refused to look away from it. Everyone knows things change. Everyone says it. Nothing lasts forever. People nod along, put it on a wall quote, and then live their entire lives as if it doesn't apply to them, as if their relationship is the exception, their health, their success, their identity. Buddha saw this as the deepest form of self-deception. He called it Anicca, and he didn't treat it as a gentle philosophical observation. He treated it as the operating system of reality. Everything arises, everything passes. No exceptions. Not your body, not your mind, not the people you love. Not the version of yourself you've spent decades constructing. And here's what he noticed that most people still miss. It's not the change that destroys you. It's the expectation that things shouldn't change. He points out that humans do something strange, almost compulsive. They take something that is, by nature, temporary, a feeling, a phase, a person's presence, and they mentally freeze it, lock it in place, build their entire sense of security around it staying exactly as it is. And when it moves, because it will move, they don't just feel loss, they feel betrayed. As if reality broke a promise it never made. Buddha argues this is not a flaw in the universe, it's a flaw in the way the mind grips. Think about it. You fall in love. Beautiful. But somewhere, quietly, you start demanding that this feeling never fade, that this person never change, that this dynamic stay frozen in its best moment forever. And the second it shifts, even slightly, anxiety creeps in. Not because something went wrong, but because you are holding on to something that was always in motion. He applies this everywhere. To pleasure, which people chase as if catching it means keeping it. To youth, which people mourn as if aging is a personal injustice. To identity, which people defend as if who they were 5 years ago is who they're supposed to be today. Buddha doesn't say this to make you nihilistic. He's not arguing that nothing matters because nothing lasts. That's a misread, a lazy one. What he's actually saying is far more precise. Your suffering is proportional to your grip. The tighter you hold, the more it hurts when it slips, and it will always slip. So what does he propose? Not detachment in the cold, emotionless sense people often assume. He proposes something harder. Full engagement without the demand for permanence. Love deeply, but don't require it to stay the same. Build something meaningful, but don't chain your peace of mind to its survival. Experience joy, but let it move through you instead of trying to trap it in a jar. That's the real skill Buddha is teaching here. Not indifference, fluidity. He warns that the mind, left unchecked, will always try to freeze reality. That's its default. It snapshots the things it likes and then spends all its energy trying to make the world match the snapshot. And every single moment of frustration, every pang of nostalgia, every fear of the future, that's the gap between the snapshot and what's actually happening. Impermanence isn't the enemy. Buddha is clear on this. The enemy is the mind's refusal to accept it. And the brutal part? You already know this. You've always known this. You've watched things change your entire life. But knowing it intellectually and living it, actually letting go in real time, those are two completely different things. That's the gap Buddha spent his life trying to close. Most philosophers tell you how the world works. Buddha tells you why you're in pain. He lays it out in 4 steps. No metaphors, no riddles. Just a clean, clinical breakdown of the human condition. He calls them the 4 noble truths. And the structure is deliberate. It mirrors how a doctor operates. Identify the disease, find the cause. Determine if there's a cure.
then prescribe the treatment. Buddha isn't preaching here, he's diagnosing. The first noble truth is dukkha, suffering. But that English word doesn't fully capture what he means. He's not just talking about pain or tragedy. He's talking about a deeper, constant dissatisfaction that runs underneath everything. That feeling that something is always slightly off. You get what you want, and it's not enough. You fix one problem, and another one shows up. Life, he argues, has this built-in quality of unsatisfactoriness. Even in good moments, there's a subtle tension, a quiet awareness that this won't hold. He's not saying life is nothing but misery. He's saying that if you look honestly, really honestly, at your experience, you'll notice that contentment never fully lands. It always has an expiration date, and that low hum of unease, that's dukkha. The second noble truth is where it gets sharp. He identifies the cause, tanha, craving. Not just wanting things, but the desperate, compulsive grasping of the mind. The thirst that never gets quenched. He breaks it into 3 types: craving for pleasure, craving for existence, the need to become something, to be someone, and craving for non-existence, the desire to escape, to check out, to not feel what you're feeling. Buddha argues that this craving is the engine behind all suffering, not the events of your life, the craving. You don't suffer because things change. You suffer because you crave for them to stay. You don't suffer because life is hard. You suffer because you crave for it to be easy. The root is always the same, always. He traces every form of human anguish back to this one mechanism. And that's what makes the third noble truth so striking: nirodha, cessation. He says suffering can end. Not through getting everything you want, that would just be feeding the craving, but through uprooting the craving itself. He argues that there's a state where this compulsive grasping loosens, falls away, and what's left isn't numbness, it's clarity, freedom, a mind that can experience life without being tortured by it. He doesn't promise paradise. He promises relief. There's a difference. The fourth noble truth is the prescription, the Eightfold Path, a practical framework for living in a way that gradually dissolves craving, and with it suffering. Right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. He's not handing down commandments. He's offering a method, a discipline, a way to retrain the mind from its default patterns of grasping and resisting. What stands out here is the precision. Buddha doesn't say just let go and leave you hanging. He gives you a system, a structured, repeatable process. He treats the human mind like something that can be understood, worked with, and fundamentally rewired. Not through faith, not through prayer, through practice. That's the part most people miss. The 4 noble truths aren't a belief system, they're a framework. Buddha essentially says, here's what's wrong, here's why it's wrong, here's proof it can be fixed, and here's exactly how to fix it. No mysticism, no hand-waving, just a clear-eyed, unflinching look at why human beings hurt and what to do about it. Here's something Buddha understood that most people never will. Suffering doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from what you hold on to. That distinction matters a lot. Buddha doesn't argue that life is pain. That's a common misreading. What he actually says is that clinging is pain. The white-knuckle grip you have on things, on people, on outcomes, on your own identity, that's where the damage is done. He uses a very specific word for it, upadana. It translates to clinging or grasping, and he treats it like a disease of the mind. Not a moral failing, not a weakness. A mechanical process that keeps running until you learn to see it and interrupt it. And he breaks it down into 4 types, 4 ways human beings latch on and refuse to let go. First, clinging to sensory pleasure, the obvious one. You taste something good and you want more. You feel comfort and you dread losing it. Every pleasant experience becomes a hook, not because pleasure is wrong, but because the desperate grip on it warps your entire psychology. Second, clinging to views. This one cuts deeper than most people realize. Buddha warns that your opinions, your beliefs, your ideological positions, they become prisons. You don't just hold a belief, the belief holds you. And you'll fight, argue, and destroy relationships to protect a viewpoint that you've welded to your sense of self. Third, clinging to rules and rituals. Buddha, a spiritual teacher, actually warns against blind attachment to religious practices. He says that performing rituals mechanically, without understanding, without awareness, is just another form of grasping. You're not free, you're just obedient. And obedience without insight changes nothing. Fourth, clinging to the idea of a fixed self. This is the deepest one, the belief that there is a permanent, unchanging you at the center of everything. Buddha argues that this belief, this attachment to identity, is the root of all the other forms of clinging. You cling to pleasure because I deserve it. You cling to views because they define me. You claw at the world because you think there's a solid self that needs protecting. But here's the thing. Buddha doesn't tell you to let go. Not really. That's where most people get his teaching wrong. They think letting go is an action, something you do, grit your teeth and release. He points out something more subtle. You let go by seeing clearly. When you truly understand that what you're holding on to is impermanent, that it's already changing, already slipping, already not what it was a moment ago, the grip loosens on its own. You don't force it, you outgrow it. He compares it to a child with a toy. A child clings to a toy with everything they've got. But an adult can hold the same toy and set it down without a second thought. Not because they force themselves, because they see it differently. That's what Buddha means by letting go. A shift in perception, not an act of willpower. And he's ruthless about this. He warns that there's no partial version of this. You can't cling to 9 things and let go of 1 and call yourself free. The mind that grasps is the mind that suffers. Period. Every attachment, no matter how noble or justified it feels, carries the same weight. Buddha doesn't promise this is easy. He never does. But he's clear. The path out of suffering doesn't run through getting more. It runs through needing less. Not wanting less, needing less. There's a difference, and Buddha knew it. Most people hear moral rules and immediately tune out. Sounds like religion. Sounds like control. Sounds like someone telling you what you can't do. But Buddha's 5 precepts aren't commandments handed down from the sky. There's no divine punishment waiting if you break them, no angry God keeping score. Buddha frames them differently. He presents them as training rules, voluntary commitments, not because some higher power demands obedience, but because your own mind demands discipline if you want any shot at peace. And that distinction matters. The 5 are straightforward. Don't kill, don't steal, don't engage in sexual misconduct, don't lie, don't cloud your mind with intoxicants. Simple list. But Buddha isn't interested in simple compliance. He's interested in why these things wreck you from the inside out. Start with the first one. Don't kill. He argues this isn't just about physical violence. It's about the relationship you build with harm itself. Every act of destruction, no matter how small, trains the mind in a specific direction. It normalizes aggression. it dulls empathy. He's not saying don't kill because life is sacred in some abstract poetic sense. He's saying every time you choose harm, you're shaping who you become, and that shape has consequences. Don't steal. Again, not just about taking someone's property. Buddha points out that stealing is rooted in a specific mental state, the belief that what you have isn't enough, that you need what belongs to someone else to feel whole. The act of taking is just the surface. Underneath it is a mind consumed by lack, and a mind consumed by lack is a mind that will never rest. Don't engage in sexual misconduct. He's not anti-desire. He's not preaching suppression. What he warns against is the kind of behavior that causes harm: betrayal, manipulation, exploitation. When desire overrides respect for another person's dignity, it doesn't just damage the other person, it corrupts the one acting on it. Buddha treats this as a practical observation, not a moral lecture. Don't lie. This one cuts deep, because Buddha argues that dishonesty doesn't just deceive others, it fractures your own relationship with reality. Every lie you tell creates a gap between what is and what you project. And over time, you start living in that gap. You lose contact with what's real. You become a performance. And a mind that can't trust its own words can't trust itself. Don't use intoxicants. And here's where people push back the most. But Buddha's reasoning is precise. He points out that the other 4 precepts require awareness, clarity, the ability to see what you're doing and why. Intoxicants destroy exactly that. They don't just impair judgment, they remove the very tool you need to follow any path at all. You can't train a mind you've deliberately shut off. So what's the pattern here? Buddha isn't handing out a list of sins. He's mapping out the behaviors that destabilize the mind. Each precept targets a specific form of internal chaos: aggression, craving, exploitation, self-deception, unconsciousness. Break any one of them, and you're not offending some deity. You're sabotaging your own clarity. And he's honest about it. He doesn't promise that following these makes you a good person. He argues they make you a functional one. A mind tangled in violence, theft, betrayal, dishonesty, and intoxication isn't free. It's drowning. The precepts aren't chains, they're structure, the kind that keeps you steady enough to actually see clearly, not because you're told to, but because you've seen what happens when you don't. Most people hear the word nirvana and think of some blissful paradise, a destination, somewhere you arrive after enough meditation, enough good deeds, enough lifetimes. Buddha says none of that. The word nirvana literally means blowing out, like a flame, not arriving somewhere, extinguishing something. And what's being extinguished? Craving, aversion, delusion. The 3 fires Buddha says are burning inside every human being, all the time. Nirvana isn't a place you go. It's what's left when those fires stop. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in his teaching, because it reframes the entire goal. You're not trying to gain something, you're trying to stop losing yourself to forces you never even noticed were running you. Buddha describes nirvana in mostly negative terms, and that's intentional. He calls it the end of suffering, the cessation of craving, the absence of clinging. He doesn't paint a picture of golden light and eternal joy. He strips it down. He argues that the moment you try to describe nirvana as some state to experience, some reward to earn, you've already turned it into another object of craving, and then you're right back on the treadmill. This is where he gets ruthlessly precise. He points out that the human mind wants to conceptualize everything, package it, label it. Even liberation, the mind tries to turn it into a thing to chase. Buddha refuses to let that happen. He warns that nirvana is not a higher state of consciousness you collect like a trophy. It's the dropping of the need to collect anything at all. And he's blunt about something else. Nirvana isn't death. That's another common misunderstanding. People hear extinction and think he's talking about annihilation, ceasing to exist. He explicitly rejects that.
He argues that nirvana is beyond both existence and non-existence. The mind that's still trapped in craving can't fully grasp it, because that mind only thinks in terms of having and not having, being and not being. Nirvana sits outside those categories entirely. So what does it actually feel like? Buddha mostly sidesteps that question, on purpose, but he gives clues. He describes it as the unborn, the unmade, the unconditioned. Everything else in human experience is conditioned, shaped by causes, changed by circumstances, temporary by nature. Nirvana is what doesn't depend on conditions. It's not built, so it can't collapse. It's not gained, so it can't be lost. He argues that this is the only real freedom, because every other kind of freedom still has strings attached. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for most people. Buddha is essentially saying that everything you think you want, every pleasure, every identity, every version of happiness you're chasing, is conditioned, temporary, leaky. Nirvana isn't a better version of those things. It's the complete release from needing them. And that doesn't sound appealing to a mind still deep in craving. He knows that. He acknowledges that this teaching is hard to hear, hard to accept. He calls it going against the stream, because every instinct in the human mind pushes towards grasping, and nirvana is the full stop of grasping. But he also says something quietly powerful. He says nirvana is available, not in some distant future, not after 1,000 rebirths, here, now. Whenever the fires go out, even for a moment, that's a taste of it. He doesn't put it on a pedestal, he puts it within reach. But reaching it requires something most people aren't willing to do. Let go. Not partially, not strategically, completely. And that, Buddha argues, is why so few ever get there. Buddha's starting point wasn't a promise. It wasn't hope. It wasn't comfort. It was a diagnosis. And it's one of the most unflinching observations ever made about the human condition. He called it dukkha, usually translated as suffering. But that translation is lazy. It misses the full weight of what he meant. Dukkha isn't just pain. It's not just misery or heartbreak or tragedy. It's something far more subtle and far more unsettling. It's the quiet, persistent sense that something is off. That hum of dissatisfaction running underneath everything, even the good things, especially the good things. Buddha argues that life isn't just painful in the obvious ways. Yes, sickness hurts, loss hurts, aging hurts. He acknowledges all of that, but he goes deeper. He says even pleasure carries dukkha inside it, because every pleasurable moment is already dying the second it begins. You know it won't last. And that knowledge, even when it's buried, even when you refuse to look at it, poisons the experience from within. That's not pessimism. That's observation. He breaks dukkha down into 3 layers, and each one cuts deeper than the last. The first is obvious suffering, pain, grief, illness, the things no one needs to be convinced are unpleasant. He doesn't dwell here. Everyone already knows this layer. The second is the suffering of change. This is where it starts to sting. He points out that every moment of happiness you've ever felt was temporary, every single one. And it's not that happiness is fake, it's that it's unstable. You hold it and it dissolves. You build something beautiful and time takes it apart. He argues that the very impermanence of good experiences creates a unique kind of anguish, not because the moment was bad, but because it ended and you wanted it to stay. The third layer is the deepest, the most radical. Buddha calls it the suffering of conditioned existence, the idea that dissatisfaction isn't something that happens to you, it's baked into the structure of how you experience reality. Your mind is constantly constructing a self, constantly defending it, constantly comparing, wanting, rejecting. And that process, that endless, exhausting mental machinery, is itself dukkha, not the events, the machinery. He's essentially saying, you don't just experience dissatisfaction, you are dissatisfaction. The way your mind is wired, the way it grasps and clings and resists, that is the source. Not your circumstances, not your bad luck, not the world being unfair. The mind itself, left unexamined, is a dissatisfaction engine. And here's what makes this diagnosis so dangerous to hear. He doesn't offer an easy fix at this stage. He just holds up the mirror. He says, look, really look. Stop pretending the next achievement, the next relationship, the next milestone is going to finally settle that restless feeling inside you. It won't. Because the restlessness isn't coming from the absence of those things. It's coming from a mind that doesn't know how to stop reaching. But, and this matters, Buddha doesn't stop at the diagnosis. He's not trying to depress anyone. He says clearly that dukkha has a cause. And what has a cause can have an end. That's the whole point of naming it. You can't treat a disease you refuse to acknowledge. So dukkha isn't a verdict, it's a starting line. He's saying the first step to freedom is admitting, fully and without flinching, that the way you've been operating doesn't work, has never worked, will never work. And only from that brutal honesty can anything real begin. Buddha spent roughly 45 years teaching, walking from village to village, town to town, talking to kings and beggars alike. Thousands of discourses, countless conversations. And then, at 80 years old, his body failing, he lay down between two sal trees and spoke his last words. And what did he say? All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. That's it. No grand revelation, no final secret saved for the deathbed moment, no mystical vision handed down to a chosen successor. Just a reminder. A blunt, unflinching reminder of everything he'd already said. And that in itself says something enormous about the man. Most founders of great traditions, they leave behind prophecies, promises, appointed heirs. Buddha leaves behind a warning and a command. Work. Keep working. Don't stop. Because nobody is going to do this for you. He doesn't say, I'll save you. He doesn't say, pray to me and you'll be fine. He doesn't say, have faith and everything will be okay. He says, strive with diligence. The weight of that word, diligence, it's not casual. It's urgent, almost severe, as if he's looking at every person who would ever hear his teachings and saying, you will be tempted to get lazy with this. Don't. And the first part of that statement, all conditioned things are subject to decay, he's circling right back to where he started, impermanence, Anicca, the very first mark of existence. Even here, at the edge of death, he doesn't soften the message, he reinforces it. Everything that is put together comes apart, including him, including his body, including, eventually, the very institutions built in his name. He's not exempt, and neither is anyone else. But there's something deeper happening in those final words that most people miss. Buddha isn't just talking about physical decay, he's talking about mental states, about progress on the path, about the insights you've gained and the discipline you've built. He's warning, those decay too. If you stop, if you get complacent, if you think you've arrived and you coast, the mind will slide right back into its old patterns. Craving, clinging, delusion. He's seen it happen. He's watched students gain clarity and then lose it because they stop doing the work. So his final breath isn't spent on comfort, it's spent on a challenge. And there's no sentimentality in it, no tearful goodbye, no I love you all. That might sound cold, but it's actually the most compassionate thing he could have done. Because Buddha understood something about human nature. People worship, they idolize, they attach to the teacher instead of the teaching. And if his last words had been emotional, personal, warm, they would have built a cult around the man. He knew that, so he points them away from himself, back to the work, back to their own minds, back to the practice. He argues from the very beginning to the very end that liberation is self-directed. No God grants it. No ritual triggers it. No teacher, not even him, can hand it to you. You do the work, or you don't, and you live with the consequences either way. That's the final message. Not hope, not reassurance, just truth. And it's fully consistent with everything he taught for 45 years. He never wavered, never contradicted himself at the end, never pulled back the curtain to reveal something softer underneath. The teaching at 80 is the same as the teaching at 35, sitting under that Bodhi tree. Existence is impermanent. Suffering is real. There is a way out, but you and only you have to walk it. His last words aren't a farewell. They're a mandate. Get to work.